are back. This is the Open Discourse podcast. I'm Jay, and I'm here with Dave. Or rather, he's here with me. Am I the guest? This is identifiably your podcast. You're the core of it.
Sort of equal withness.
Sure, and I just jump in on owning the mind share of the podcast initially.
You're much more of a you're a much more energetic radio person than I am. Until I get fired up about something, then I'm like.
I've also been drinking all night, so.
Well, yeah, that's normal though.
We went out, we got some margaritas, and yeah, it's been good. So, this is the Open Discourse podcast, where the two of us and theoretically guests that can join at their leisure,
which we've even slacked off on for the past several recordings. We just have not gone out of our way to get it.
No. Even you fans, you listening, you can theoretically be on this podcast. All it takes is you just message us, and we will we'll do it.
Incredibly low, and we talk about pretty much anything that can be an exchange and not just a lecture.
Yeah, anything at all. We talk about politics and social stuff, and even just nerd garbage sometimes. That's just the way Dave and I operate.
Yeah. It's fairly improvisational in tone.
So we've been off for
we've had an extended hiatus for
not even intentionally, not even planned, not even
was sort of unintentional, real life getting in the way and
it was this whole weird thing. Dave came down and visited me, and this was already a week or something past what we should have been doing. Then I felt oh no, we'll make it. I have a thing to set up, and that fell through.
That just didn't happen because I was too busy enjoying the city.
Yeah, it's a good city.
It really I honestly it reminded me how much I missed living in a city.
Yeah, before that even
I haven't lived in a city since middle school, and
just
wandering around in the city was it was nice. It's nice to be in a place where there's so much going on. Because I live in a place where it's sort of suburban, turning into a lot of mixed development. Lots of old white people, not to, speak ill of old white people or white people in general. It's just fairly boring for a young 20-something who looks
they don't have
ethnic.
A lot going on. And that city you were in when you were in middle school, that was in Peru, right?
Yeah.
So kind of different.
Well, different in some ways, but honestly, I think there's a universality.
Yeah.
To human needs, and it sort of results in a recurring theme of how cities and the towns and whatnot are structured. I mean, it was the same sort of deal in Peru. You had the crazy busy areas. You had the neighborhoods for a few blocks and then right back to city stuff.
Yeah. I imagine in any city in the modern world there is the same type of corner store with Doritos and Coors Light and
exactly.
That's on any that's in any city.
And I think really the only difference in Peru is that on near to the outskirts of the city you get shanty towns, so you get this weird sort of city sandwich, because people love to use the term inner city as code for the poor part of the city, but there is some truth to that. It's normally in some of the central districts where people are poorer.
Yeah.
And so in Peru there was the sandwich of poor, moderate to high affluence, and then back to poor.
Yeah. And every once in a while there's an alpaca.
Well, depends on where you are. The city I was in was more coastal.
Yeah, I only have bad
alpacas are more
American
in the
white
Andes.
boy preconceptions of what South America is.
They're more in the mountains.
Yeah. So, This is the Open Discourse podcast. What are we talking about this week?
Have you got anything? Cause man, we could
I
just
mean, we can.
honestly we could fill the whole episode today just talking about like the last week of news has been insane. But
Oh boy,
do
yeah,
you
we
have
could. Yeah,
anything other than that?
let's get topical because I think this is the total place to get topical. Like, listen, people, we are recording this. It's getting to be about midnight my time on a Wednesday, May the 7th, 2017. So I'm just
Yes.
gonna date it really hard off the bat,
Yeah, but the
because
context will help, I think, this time.
yeah, because we can talk about topical stuff here, and it makes sense because this is our like weekly, just chatting about modern goings on and stuff and happenings. Um, Recently, I was at a local comedy, stand-up comedy open mic night, and things were they were like very topical, like, oh, in the news recently, bits that a lot of people were throwing out, and I admire the people who get up at a stand-up comedy club's open mic night and put themselves out there like that.
Yeah, man. I
But
feel like I'd bomb super hard.
I'm sure I would too. But at the same time, I'm just like, topical stuff. Like, yeah, easy targets. We all read the news. I don't know.
Does everyone read the news?
I mean, I sure don't. But
Hmm.
um, so I was just like, like I would be impressed if you weren't going for like the low-hanging topical fruits. And
Yeah.
that's me talking shit on people who are like really doing their best, putting out there in a way that is really risky and really, takes a lot of courage to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a bad person, but I was recently. I've absorbed a good bit of recent topical news information because I do not keep track of the news. But I was over this past weekend in a hotel room in New York City, staying there with my mother because we were hanging around Times Square, and she has the news on every morning, like watching the comings goings on. So I
Yep.
saw like the most news I'd ever seen in the longest time over this
Uh-huh.
past weekend. And you know what they're talking about, Dave?
What?
Do you know what they're talking about
No.
right now?
Tell me.
Is information getting sent or getting said, maybe just in conversation, to
Yep.
Russians.
Oh, yep. That's a
That's
thing
the thing.
that's been happening.
Yep, we're dating it. Maybe so. What's interesting about dating yourself like this what's getting talked about now? Is that Trump was just saying some shit, and like leaked in conversation some classified information to some Russian diplomat. I don't know the specifics. I'm not well
Right,
read. I'm
which
not a
for
source of
most
news.
other people would be appalling, and I was surprisingly numb when I read it.
Oh, dude,
Or
everyone's
most other
numb. It's
public officials, I should say, it would be appalling to read something like that.
it's
And then the
so numb now because like
craziest part was that day, the day the story broke. Sean Spicer going, "Oh no, no, he didn't do that," and then H.R. McMaster's, which is the national security advisor who replaced Flynn, who left because of ties to Russia and also
H.R.
Turkey.
McMaster's.
Um, he has been fairly well regarded, and he by both sides of the political spectrum. And he goes out there and he says, "Nope, no confidential intel leaked. I was there. Nothing was exchanged that was confidential." And then the very next morning, Mango Mussolini himself takes to Twitter and says, "I can say whatever I want. I have every right to leak information to the Russians." Or no, I have every right to share information with the Russians. It just immediately discrediting his public surrogates.
Didn't this previous election hinge heavily on one of the candidates' potential leaking of some low-level classified information to somebody?
That was a thing that was leveraged against Hillary Clinton, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, that sure was what I was alluding to. And used as this big ol' hammer to like slam the Democratic Party into the ground. And I'm not gonna get onto a fucking box and defend Hillary Clinton,
Yeah.
but just that the real big crux of so much arguing was the integrity of intelligence information in the United States.
Right.
And there was a fucking tweet a while ago that was just predicted like, oh, says Trump blurts out the nuclear launch codes just to prove that he knows them.
Huh.
That was a tweet, and it, is starting to come true. The idea that there could even be like the idea of a scandal about he just said in conversation just to boast some secret information.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about it, but wasn't the information something to the effect of like, oh, there's going to be a big terrorist attack from the Israeli
I
state?
don't exactly remember what, but what happened? The effect was it put an Israeli operative that had been placed in undercover in ISIS in some pretty real danger.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, apparently, U.S. officials have been warning Israel to not share important information with Trump.
Yeah. That's what I've heard about.
But
Like,
something else, just to add to this whole storm, that's how I've been perceiving it. It's just like this constant onslaught of just ridiculous insanity. Is on Friday, I want to say it was Friday of last week, Trump just sort of on the spot fired Comey. Like no one knew it was happening. He blindsided the FBI. He blindsided everyone who wasn't him and wasn't the I want to say deputy attorney general.
yeah. I remember reading about like the man himself, Comey, like saw it on the news and it was just like, huh, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Before
and
anyone
a
ever
lot of
told him
people are
about it.
saying it's because he wants to end the Russia investigation.
Yeah.
I kind of can't help but wonder if it's just pure ego and nothing else. Because in a hearing that same week, Comey said it something to the effect of it made him nauseous to think that his letter about Hillary Clinton helped Trump win, which it
Yeah.
probably I don't want to say it was decisive, but it probably tipped the scales a little near the end.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
and
none.
I don't
Like,
know, my mental image of Trump is just so incompetent that I could see him just just having this knee-jerk reaction that ends up unraveling the whole tapestry of lies. What
yeah.
I don't
One
know.
would hope.
Like maybe he's not that incompetent, but at the very least, they created a paper trail when they heard of that there was a Russian investigation, thus making the need for a Russian investigation even more apparent, which is the big irony, right?
Yeah, because what like the doth what a fucking doth protest too much to like
Well, they're not they're not the actions of a man who's truly innocent, or at least they don't appear to be. Again,
yeah.
he may be so stupid that he may be so incompetent, I should say. I don't want to use the term stupid. He may be so incompetent that he just doesn't realize what he's doing.
God, yeah, like the
Wouldn't that
problem
be
is
nuts if everyone but Trump himself was actually guilty? Like he was just so bad at being a public official, he just sort of got through everything being a puppet for Russia without even knowing.
it's so confusing. I don't even know like how to cuz with everything like he's either a fucking weird mastermind or he's just the dumbest fucker in the world. And and I don't get it cuz like it could all be like this world's most fantastic ruse where he's like playing this wacky dipshit the entire time like to get us to underestimate it or
Yeah,
something.
but
I
the
but
reason
I
I brought all this up is because it started people sounding off about we need an independent prosecutor.
Oh
I
yeah.
have mixed feelings, or a special prosecutor. I have mixed feelings because I've read some stuff that I can't quite recall well at the moment that would indicate that a special prosecutor is really more of just they report directly to the Justice Department and it's not as effective as just letting the FBI do their thing. And I've read
I
stuff
mean, you
that
should have like
says
a
the special
totally
prosecutor's
independent
good.
like
So,
person.
what was that?
You should have like a totally independent like set of like zero potential for conflicts of interest, which I believe in from what I understand this administration
Oh,
is
it's rife with
characterized
them,
by.
but
Yeah.
that's why I'm on the fence about it. But the reason I brought it up is because today I was reading that they are going to appoint a special prosecutor, and the special prosecutor is no less than a former head of the FBI, who essentially saved the institution after 9/11.
Hmm.
Uh, Little known fact: the agencies had most of the info to on that 9/11 was being planned. They just couldn't put it together before it happened. And that's why I
Yeah.
say he saved the institution. A lot of people credit this guy, whose name I'm blanking out on, with building the agency into what it is today, for better or for worse.
What,
But
because
it
they were
does have
looking
a
like the world's
very
biggest schlubs or theoretical conspirators for
yeah.
like
But to
not
be
having
fair,
stopped it when they
that
could have?
that reputation comes with a very strong. I don't even want to say bipartisan. Maybe nonpartisan, not apolitical reputation, which I think it is. If we're gonna have a special prosecutor, that's what we need. And I'm sort of
Yeah.
hoping that the deputy attorney general appointing the special prosecutor is not so much him trying to cover up for Trump, because he is a Trump appointee, and more
Yeah.
so him just not wanting to get thrown under the bus, because Trump just throws everyone under the bus before himself.
Yeah, really.
Um,
Because
like
wasn't
maybe
wasn't
seeing
the
some of that really annoying political self-preservation in action. But and then I'm just gonna keep moving with this momentum I got here, because it's just been a
oh yeah.
snowball from my perspective. But and then it came out that Trump may have genuinely asked James Comey to stop the investigation into Flynn, which is obstruction of justice, which is what Richard Nixon was impeached for. And so
Yeah.
now we're hearing people starting to sound off on the floor of the House about beginning the impeachment process.
Yeah.
And
Fucking
Jason Chaffetz, I think his name is Jason, uh, Chaffetz, who is the guy in charge of I want to say House Oversight Committee. He's from Utah, and he was the one responsible for, throughout the Obama administration, haranguing Hillary Clinton over this and that, really for no good, well, not a lot of good reasons.
not for
And
none good, but not for a lot of good.
right, and he started sounding off about, like, I want to see the memo that Comey wrote after this meeting. I have my subpoena pen ready. It's like, oh, could this finally be it? And I'm not
Are
getting my
we
hopes up, because I've
finally?
said that
Yeah.
so many times. But
I
um,
can't ever like get ready for anything to finally take him down because, and I've talked about this before, like a friend of mine was just like, oh, grab him in the pussy, this is the one that's gonna take him down. And I
yeah, we
thought,
talked
no,
about
no,
this before.
he's got through so much worse than this. It can't. And it didn't. And the pussy grabbing man became the president. And so that like leads me to just be in this like really dark place of like what the fuck can finally take him down, because it's been talks about Russian connections and conflicts of interest and fucking boiling all the way back down to the fucking whole Ivanka Trump clothing line conflict of interest thing about like the presidential office shan't be used to promote commercial interests or whatever. That like that was already like a big enough conflict of interest to
Yeah,
the effect that like they have like ambassadors and shit staying in his own fucking hotels that I'm sure
yeah,
he's making
yeah.
stupid
Oh
money
yeah,
out of.
no, it's been a cavalcade of, like, this is the thing, and it's not. It's
Yeah,
never
and so
been.
I'm just like, so what the fuck is gonna take him down and when, and can we just
Can we get there already?
get through with it already?
Yeah,
For
but
fuck's sake.
yeah,
It's
one
exhausting.
last thing, and then I'm gonna say my takeaway from all this, because we're really just sort of summarizing,
Yeah.
and really all we can do is speculate at this point, because it's a lot of ongoing shit.
But
Um,
talking about it like this is a mechanism by which I can try to understand what's happening because I don't pay crazy good attention to what's going on in the news
yeah.
myself.
So another minor thing that isn't so minor is the president of Turkey, Erdogan, visited
Okay.
recently, and he's basically a totalitarian dictator. He's just shy of it at this point. And
Okay. That's not
his
great.
bodyguards attacked U.S. citizens on U.S. soil.
I didn't hear none about this.
Look it up. It's crazy. And apparently the State Department is now starting to look into finding the people responsible. But the fact that there has been no reaction at all from or denunciation of the behavior by Trump himself is just, I don't know. To me, that's like throwing salt on the wound.
There's been no denunciation of it.
Nope, he just said it
Is
was
the
really
idea?
great to meet with a great man like Erdogan. Like his admiration for totalitarian rulers really creeps me out.
I'm definitely looking right now at a video of dudes in suits
Oh, it's
beating the
brutal.
shit out of
It's
other
it's
people.
brutal. Yeah.
Oh God, I've it really made me
Yeah, and
sick.
those are U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. Like this is not the
Yeah,
kind of thing we should be allowing to happen.
Jesus
Um,
Christ.
but what I was gonna say is all of this that's been going on to me is just if there was ever any doubt as to the need for us to break away from the two-party system and the toxic, deeply toxic effect it has on our society and our political systems, look no further than the disconnect between the concrete, provable reality of what's been going on with Trump. Even if he hasn't colluded with the Russians, like, what is it? Something stinks in the state of Denmark.
Yeah,
Um, something is up. The the disconnect between the concrete, provable facts and the reaction by the Republican-controlled government to what's been going on.
yeah.
This is a
It's
very clear instance of party over country, and it's really sickening. And I'd be really sick if the Democrats did it too. And I was sick when they did it when they sort of schemed to get Bernie Sanders off the ticket.
yeah,
And there's a whole nother debate rolled up into there. Maybe people don't like the use of the word schemed, for example. I full disclosure, I was a Bernie supporter. I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I'm not a huge fan of hers.
yeah. Same
Um,
here.
and the whole idea of political machines to me is just becoming very distasteful.
Yeah,
Uh,
like Jesus Christ.
because it
Fucking
becomes it becomes this new modern tribalism where it's less about the facts and what's actually best for you or society as a whole, but it's about I voted Republican for 20 years, I ain't gonna start voting Democrat now, or
yeah,
some other BS like that. And it's just disgusting. There's this disconnect as well where the left and the right, to dichotomize our political uh, society, I suppose, are just talking right past each other.
yeah, yeah. Are you there?
No, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
thought you were
Sorry, I
gonna
just
say something.
no. Sorry, I thought you were gonna say something. I'm
Oh,
processing. It's
oh.
God. I always get like this just traffic jammed in terms of political conversations because I don't know what to say. Like I've always grown up my whole life in the fucking sphere of that it's a two-party political system, which you hear about.
I
And I've
was
listened to people from like England and from Australia and stuff like two very, like white people, Anglo
Yeah.
type
Well,
countries like have their parliamentary systems and stuff, and they think it's baffling that there's two parties here. And
yeah.
I think like it's
I
hard
mean,
for me
to
to
be
imagine
perfectly honest, I
having
think the whole
3 to 4 to
mechanism.
5 to whatever amount of like other parties like grappling for a certain percentage of seats in a parliament. It's
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And to be fair though, well, not to be fair, just to clarify, I've been against the idea of political parties just end of statement since high school. Sometime in high school, I can't remember. It's all a blur at this point.
yeah.
Um,
The idea for starters that like that implies is that political and social beliefs and leanings exist on a dichotomous spectrum is already like a certain baked in cultural belief that is not necessarily true, but that like shapes the way you perceive anything is that there is a left and a right, that it is a one-dimensional political spectrum.
yeah, well, that's an actually very old school of thought, the left versus the right. I
Yeah.
don't remember how far back it dates, but that predates U.S. political parties, I believe,
Hmm.
by quite some time, or maybe even just a little bit of time. But
But it is
I
definitely
I think people should, Because, like, one of the arguments for parties is like, oh, well, you have a sort of pre-built platform for stuff that you don't give a shit about. And it's like, well, that's fine, but how about you
I
just
definitely
work
get the
with
amount of simplification that it lends to the political
Well,
system.
that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is like that's bullshit. Like you should just be able to work with other people. I'm not saying everybody needs to be an expert on every single issue. That's also insane. But
Yeah.
the idea that you need to fall in lockstep with what is essentially a fundraising and power farming mechanism at this point is
Power
is
farm.
is disgusting to me.
Yeah. It's fucking, and the way that these recent events have like really shown the shape of the like firm party allegiance structure that goes on in our country
Yeah.
is that's been like kind of alarming in itself because fucking the entire time everything even leading up to the election everything going on was talking about like, oh, look, there's all this rhetoric about like, oh, the GOP, the Republican Party, look at how like the strain they're under because they like the institutionalized structure of them does not want fucking Donald Trump to be there,
Well,
but
that
that's
was
something that's happening to it, and they are kind of complicit in it, but like not
Oh
necessarily
no, they are
agreeing, but
not.
not
They are not
necessarily
kind of
fighting it.
complicit. They are fully complicit in everything
Oh,
he's
sure.
doing.
And that the thing is that like all I hear about is like the problems that the Republican establishment is having with him and his administration, but then they fall
The
lockstep
disgusting
so
thing is
hard.
they're trying to put up with it for as long as they can until they pass their agenda, and then they're gonna drop him. I can guarantee it. If he doesn't get impeached soon, they're gonna stay on board long enough to pass everything they want to pass. Hopefully before midterms in 2018, and then they're gonna drop him.
Yeah.
They're gonna turn on him because he's more a liability than he is a help past that
Well,
point. But when I'm saying the Republican Party is fully complicit in everything to do with the Trump administration, let me give you some context. During our hiatus, there was an election in France where a similar Trump-like figure with similar dubious ties to Russia popped up, named
oh
I
yeah.
want to say Marie Le Pen or something,
Yeah. I've heard some of this.
something Le
Keep
Pen.
going. Yeah.
Um, Very similar to Trump in her rhetoric, nativist rhetoric, anti-immigration, France first type bullshit, and the EU kind of stuff.
France first.
But
Uh,
she didn't win. She actually lost by a decisive margin.
I remember seeing
Percentage-wise, it's
like,
not huge, but it's decisive apparently according to French election rules that I'm not familiar with.
yeah.
And the reason that happened is because when it became clear that it was just Le Pen and Macron, the two people facing off, the French conservative establishment did not rally around her. They rejected her outright. They didn't do this namby-pamby bullshit the Republican Party tried to do, which is they tried to sort of push him out discreetly, and then they couldn't. They backed themselves into a corner where it was either denounce him or get on board, and they couldn't
Yeah.
bear to denounce him, so they got on board and they rallied
Yeah.
around him. And that is why I blame the Republican Party for everything he does. I'm like I said, I don't believe in political parties. I vote my conscience up and down the ballot and on every proposition in local elections. I don't look at party affiliation. But
Yeah. And so
I feel
what happened in
absolutely
France was
no
that
guilt in blaming an entire party for what's going on right now.
yeah. And so like what happened in France was that like the right side of the political spectrum in France was just like, okay, we're not doing this. We saw, I mean,
Not the right side of the political spectrum. The established infrastructure of the conservative mechanism, I guess, in France, the whatever the conservative political establishment was, our analog would be the Republican Party. I don't know how it
yeah,
works in France, but whatever
yeah,
that is in France, they rejected Le Pen. They did
yeah,
not support her.
yeah, because like that kind of like hard nationalist stuff is like going way too far, like
That's the
down
kind of
the
shit that leads
certain
to
fascist
wars.
rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I guess at the very least, let us be a fucking educational anecdote, because apparently that's all we are now.
Yeah, a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So recently, oh wait, did this happen? You're in Texas. I don't know. Yesterday, I think, or Tuesday, I guess, was an election for like local government and like judges and stuff.
Yeah, we had
And
one last week.
okay, did you vote on that stuff?
Yes.
I didn't. I'm a fucker. I don't know, like, if I'm registered for this zone, like, could I go back to the same place I voted for, like, the presidential election and, like, do that
I
stuff?
would think so. Polling places tend to be open for every election.
Yeah, I would too, but it really snuck up on me and I felt wicked guilty about it because I'm like, no, this is the stuff that's important. Your like local city government and your the people that, you know, work out the kind of not only legislation but the enforcement of XYZ forms of legislation that actually affect your life and the lives of people around you. So it seems, from what I understand and from what I hear from all of the rhetoric everywhere, is that that's the more important type of stuff that you have to focus on. That stuff that goes on in like big abstract spheres like the federal government or even the state government to a certain effect, like you have influence on that and you have your voice on that and that affects things. But I don't know, like anything that fucking the Trump administration does has to filter back through the enforcement agencies in the like local spheres.
Yeah.
And depending on like if your political engagement in your local community influences your local government and infrastructure to like resist that kind of stuff is you know its own like level at which you can exert political power against the higher up more abstract forces that be, which are fucked. So I didn't vote and I shoulda, but I didn't even know it was fucking happening. And maybe that's part of the idea is that I mean it's sure as shit like local judges and voting on who you want the city coroner or the comptroller to be. I don't even know what
Yeah.
a comptroller does, but you figure that like maybe it's in somebody's certain kind of subversive interest that you don't really know uh, when that voting is going on and what that kind of voting entails and who is, votable in that sphere. So, what have I been talking about? Yeah, maybe I totally fell for some kind of thing that people don't want me to be involved on this level. Maybe I just spaced out and overthinking it, but I feel like I should have voted. So
I mean,
that's
I'm
what's
not going
going
to
on with me.
sugarcoat it. I think you probably should have, because the reason the Republican Party has such a stranglehold at this point is the people who vote most reliably in local elections are old people
Yeah,
and religious fundamentalists, and also unemployed white people.
yeah,
And no, and the distinction there is important. I think that it's the white people who are unemployed who vote more consistently than
yeah.
other white people, or not other white people, than other people who are unemployed. Other white people. What the hell's wrong with
That's
me?
fine. Don't worry. I didn't even notice. I would be the first to say like it's white people's fault for XYZ.
but
I mean, often enough. You never know.
I think this whole situation is still an outgrowth of this really unhealthy exchange we've had with the extreme right and the extreme left, just sort of constantly pushing people to the fringes by just reacting over the top to each other. And I've talked about this before, and it's really disheartening to watch it still happening. And
Yeah.
The whole narrative of, and this is going to, the left and the right speaking past each other, because there's a huge segment of the left that says, oh, we don't need to reach out to Trump voters or the swing voters who voted for Trump. They all voted for Trump because of racism and xenophobia. And then you have all the Trump voters who, as far as I can tell, they voted more on an emotional impulse than actual, really any sort of one stance or standpoint. They were
I know what you
mostly
mean. It seemed to be
reacting to
like
the
this like
perception of.
reactionary
They were mostly
react
reacting to the perception of the leftist elite and the boogeyman of the social justice warrior and
and
all
the
that.
like profound dissatisfaction they have with the world and like what they
Right, and that's why
project
none
is the
of these
source of
facts are
that problem.
shaking his base, because they don't care about facts. They voted for him on an emotional surge, essentially. And
Yeah.
the left, myself included, read all these facts, and we're like, why are none of these facts getting through? And they voted it because they don't care about the facts, and that's not a value judgment. I wish they did, but they don't. It's an emotional thing to them, as far as I
Yeah.
can understand. That is.
I mean, I see that too, and on a certain level, I want to be like, I want to give them the benefit of some kind of doubt that it's like, it's that that's like underestimating the thought that they've gone through with this stuff, but at the same time,
I
I'm just
just
like,
don't think
fucking,
a
is that
healthy
giving them too much credit? Like,
I just don't think a healthy society can survive condemning that many people without any sort of stain on their conscience.
yeah, Jesus Christ.
That is not the mark of a healthy society. And I don't think we've been a healthy society for a while. But
Nah,
that certainly doesn't help. This
yeah.
weird condemnation, your team did this, my team did that game. How about we all just fucking forget about it and start working towards stuff we can agree with, instead of this weird twisted revenge game we're playing that really only seems to benefit people like Mitch McConnell and like Comcast or something.
Yeah. A big narrative I've heard is that with this like the whole like right wing resurgence and stuff, like the formation of the Tea Party, and then subsequently the alt right and the Trump coming to power and all of this stuff, like has been just a response of dissatisfaction of having a black president for whatever period of time, and that it's just a reactionary like surge to undo and rubber band hard in the opposite direction of whatever a black president did as
Yeah, and we're seeing
a
that real
racist
hard.
response. Yeah,
I would agree with that, because like look no further than healthcare. Like, people didn't even bother to learn what Obamacare is.
there's been a wicked double standardizing. I remember in the fucking Obama Romney election, people were talking about the Obama healthcare, the Obamacare, is a form. It is like the same thing that Mitt Romney introduced in his own state, like when
Yeah,
he was he the governor or was he a senator of it, or I don't
governor, I
remember.
believe, at the time.
Governor, that's what a governor would do is implement actual legislation in their own state. And they're like, no, it takes the exact same structure that they introduced there, but the fact that it was, named after and relied on and was under the administration of a black man, that it's the fucking problem now. And that's what you see, like, following this election, is so many people voting against their own interests and their own, lifestyle security
Yeah,
and XYZ because of the idea that the black president's the one that like has taken all of these steps in the wrong directions, kind of like just on the preconception that he was just the black president taking steps in any directions. And you see all these sensationalized videos on Facebook and shit about like, oh, we asked people who voted for Trump, like, what do you think about Obamacare? And they're like, we hate it. And they're like, what do you think about the Affordable Care Act? We love it. And we're like, well, got some news for you. They're the same thing. And the Affordable Care Act was branded as Obamacare by right media
yeah,
for to associate just the legislation itself with a black man so that you would dislike it.
yeah.
So
And
that's the fucking concept.
speaking of media, I'm just so fed up with most of it. Like CNN, their Achilles heel is false equivalencies between viewpoints that present themselves as opposing. I would argue they're not actually opposing. That would imply
Hmm.
they're standing on equal footing.
Yeah,
Fox's problem is that they are essentially a propaganda tool for the Republican Party, whether they want to admit it or not.
for sure. I
Um,
was seeing stuff about like where every news agency is talking about the Russia information leak over the last week.
except
Fox
Fox.
News has been, you know,
Talking about the
uh,
Clintons.
yeah, or some shit about Miss America or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct, and it's insane to me. Um,
Yeah,
and then MSNBC is just I don't even know right now. I don't know.
I
I'm
don't
just
really know what.
super disillusioned with media in general.
Yeah, your audio is kind of like crackling for me.
Oh, that might be like my internet deciding to get a little funky with it.
It's fine. You're doing good now.
Um,
A lot of news agencies, like I don't really keep track of. I understand what Fox News is for sure. Like that's nothing about that has like terribly changed over the last 8 years or so.
no.
But CNN and MSNBC are just like I don't know, just like this vague like corporate news source that I always figured out would just be kind of like interchangeable.
Well, CNN, like well, I grew up watching CNN when we had cable, which is when I lived in Peru for like 3 years, because my
Yeah,
parents trusted CNN. I don't
because
trust
CNN.
CNN anymore because CNN is more about spectacle than it is about actually getting to. Well, honestly, all of it's more about spectacle than it is actually getting to the bottom of anything, which is really what pisses me off about the state of media in general. Is because I want to have people. If I were to run a network, I would have people come on and I would let them say their piece. No one would interrupt. And then the next thing would be a point by point. Okay, this is what you said. This is why you're correct or wrong.
Yeah.
We don't do. Instead, you just get people yelling over each other, no matter where you go to watch.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, those like talking head segments where it's like four people at a table and they are all talking over each other at the same time. It's just I don't know.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It's no proper form of discourse, but I mean, I'm no big intellectual, but that doesn't seem like a the right way to discuss sensitive issues is
No, it
to
doesn't. The problem is we've lost all nuance, and now we're just sort of repeating ourselves.
yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I think we've sort of hit the logical endpoint here, unless you've got anything else to say.
Um I'm not sure. I'm just like dead on everything. I've been dead for a while. I've been uh fucking struggling with everything. And we talked about like that people are talking about now, like, oh, the impeachment papers are being drafted. And I'm like, great. Haven't they been doing that for like the last whole year or something? Like at least in anticipation of him getting elected, that they were like planning it that far ahead of time. Fucking like everything's been talking about it for the longest time, and the terrifying thing is that like the pussy grabbing audio clip didn't take him down. Any number of racist things he said, any number of like factual inaccuracies or inconsistencies in whatever he says himself, anything that we could possibly point out about like how he's been wrong, how he's contradicted himself, how he's like directly said shit that is really the reddest flags, the
Right.
like fucking the country asked Bill Clinton to resign for lying about getting a blowjob. Fucking was he formally impeached? I don't even know.
Bill Clinton? Yes, he was.
Oh no shit.
I
Was
believe
Nixon
so.
impeached?
Yes, on perjury.
Yeah, was Nixon impeached formally?
I think so, but I think he resigned before it went anywhere.
I might be confusing the outcomes of Nixon and Clinton just then. But like I mean, fucking like men have gone down for less, and we're like really getting to the point of like explicit high level treason. That Christ, like what the fuck can take him down? Like we need just something for Christ's sake. And
Yeah.
I've heard people talk about like, there's rumors that like they're gonna announce that he has some medical thing that he has to step down. And I'm like, okay, all right. Yeah,
I'm
and
sure at
even
some point Trump will try and pull something that makes it look like it was his idea to leave if he leaves.
yeah.
Because he's all about
Oh,
showmanship.
oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. He's never going to admit that they got him, for sure. He's gonna be like, you can't fire me, I quit.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see what goes down if a smoking gun appears in the whole Russia investigation.
I just want anything to fucking happen for Christ's sake. It's been this long, it's been
It's soul
half a
crushing.
year of this exhaustive, like, what the fuck is gonna happen with our country, with our world, with our culture, with our entire core structure of the political system? What the fuck is going on? I just want them to be like, okay, so I don't know. I just want anyone to do anything. And I don't have a real position on like what that is or my own stance and my own perspective on I don't know what any of that could be and what any consequence of anything would be. I'm a young intoxicated white man who's sick of the status quo and I want the revolution to happen. But not in a way that infringes on my lifestyle and creature comforts.
Well, there's the rub then.
There's the rub.
Well, it's funny. Changing gears a little bit, I've sort of been in internal conflict for the past few weeks. Because, one of the core things that I've hold very sacred is the idea of exchange of ideas and like giving everybody the chance to speak at the very least. Free speech as a less as a law and more as a principle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I read a history of Holocaust denialism in the U.S., and it rings eerily true to climate denial and
Ugh.
just generally the whole tone that the extreme right has taken when confronting um, what they call college elitism with regard to leftist ideals,
Yeah.
which is like I'm just presenting an opposing view. That is how Holocaust denialism made its way to where it is today in the U.S. Just it's free speech. I'm presenting an opposing view, and that's just so deeply troubling to me.
Man.
And like, yeah, sure, the immediate response is like, okay, but that's a fallacy because history is the constant study and challenge towards existing perspectives of shit that went down in the past. An opposing viewpoint would hypothetically be contained within that study, right?
Yeah.
So, by that logic, this opposing viewpoint is not really an opposing viewpoint.
I would like
But
to be
people
done
don't
with the
process that far. It's like the whole denial of the scientific process. And I say the scientific process because there is some weird behavior I've seen where people are starting to treat science like a new religion, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
yeah.
But the opposition to scientific consensus is upsetting for much the same reason, where they'll say, "Oh, well, how like all these scientists could say this, but what if they're wrong? Science has been wrong before." And it's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point of science. It's a methodology of constantly trying to prove yourself and your friends wrong. And when this many scientists come to a consensus, sure, they could be wrong. It's not 100% certain. Nothing is.
Yeah.
But when it's over 90%, maybe instead of outright dismissing them because it's inconvenient for business, you ought to give it a listen.
I would like to be done with false equivalency. In the fucking whole world. Like, I would like to be able to establish culturally like what ideas are like not acceptable. Because you were talking about like the idea of like so much gets by on like, oh, it's free speech, it's an opposing opinion, it's it's a different. oh, it's coming
Right, and
from a different culture or a different
provably
mindset. And it's like,
false.
no, if someone rolls up and they're like, hey, what if we fucking say, and somebody comes up like and they wear a nice suit and they speak into the microphone and they say like, it is in my firm opinion that rape should be legal. And it's like, well, we can fucking. That's an extreme example. I'm sorry that I threw out such an extreme example. But, like, we should be able to say, like, no, that's not acceptable. And that even by saying that and throwing that out there and posing the idea that that could be acceptable is itself damaging to our society. So maybe don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of just what's really been troubling me, though, is like, if anybody can roll up and claim whatever reason they invent to deny the conclusion of a process or the current standing point in a process, with regards to studies. I would consider science in general like an ongoing process. The study of history is an ongoing process. Like, if somebody just rolls up with whatever contrived reason they have to say, you're wrong because your opinion disagrees with my bigotry or my preconceived notion of the world, and they can invent whatever reason they want and say that's an opposing viewpoint, that really challenges my whole thing of like expose bad ideas to daylight so people can see them for the bad ideas they are. Because clearly people don't process beyond the fact that like, oh, it's an opposing viewpoint, I should hear it out, and because that opens people up to these really charismatic liars.
Yeah, and
And just
that's
yeah, I'm in such I've tied
so
myself in
like
knots over this because it's so contrary to something at my core, like what
so
I'm
like
what
the
I'm thinking.
the the peak liberalism as I've seen is just like, no, like if the Nazis want to fucking get up on a stand and like say how all the, non-whites are bad, let them do that and then everyone will see how fucked up it is to say the non-whites are bad. And you're like, boy, I would love if that were the case. And
But see, the
but like
problem
the
with where you're going with this is you're in a no-win situation where if you let them speak, they recruit people, and if you don't give them a
yeah,
platform or you oppose them vehemently, they martyr themselves and they bring people to their cause anyway. And it's just like, how do
yeah,
you win against ideas that are just rotten to the core for
and are
either
like so
ethical,
subversive
ideological, or
and
what
just
have you?
sneaky and can like twist any outcome like to their benefit where it's like no they're trying to the Nazis then end up being like no they're trying to science us, the liberal Jew media is shutting us down, they're opposing our free speech, we deserve to be able to spout hatred everywhere. And it's like, yeah, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that, bro.
Right, and then there's the whole discussion of where the law and what the role where the law should stand on it and what the role of government and all that is. And I don't
that's
really
where
want to touch
that's
that
where
right
I'm done
now
with
because
that's where
I'm just
that's
all
where I'm
bent out
done
of
with
shape
false
over the ethics of it all right now.
that's where I'm done with false equivalency, like because it's been this for the longest time. The discourse on free speech has been like, well, I can say whatever I want, it's free speech. But like, that's not the idea of free speech. Is that like the government can't tell you what to say, but your fellow man and the culture and the society that you live in establishes certain rules on what you can and can't say and
Well,
what
see,
ideas
I
are
think mob
unacceptable.
censorship is not necessarily healthy either because that's essentially what it is, to put it in a negative term, I suppose. And I don't think because now in modern times we also have corporate censorship. Not speaking out your true mind because you want to keep your job, or not going to a protest because you don't want to get fired for getting a criminal record, for getting arrested, rightfully or wrongly. Stuff like that. Like, I still want to believe that all forms of censorship are wrong.
Yeah. Corporate censorship is dubious. Mass censorship, I think less so because the mass is like not theoretically like a mob trying to shut you down, as it is in a lot of cases from what I've seen.
I
Just
would
the
disagree.
social consensus
I would
on like
disagree.
to say that like
Because
racist speech is theoretically
fast
like
rewind
unacceptable
to any given
socially.
point in time and think of any commonly held notion at that period that was considered to be common knowledge, common courtesy, that was actually pretty awful. Like, oh, I don't know, the Jews being the root of the bubonic plague, for example. That was a legitimate belief held by Europe as it was being ravaged by the bubonic plague. Um, and that justified a lot of horrible stuff.
That's actually you raised a really good point. If
when you
the social
crowdsource
consensus is to an
anything, you
idea that
lose
is progressive
accountability
or
for.
regressive, you do have to like be able to define like what is a positive social consensus and what is a negative social consensus.
Right, and
Because a
that's what I'm
negative social
saying.
consensus 50 years ago was that black people shouldn't vote, or maybe more than 50 years,
Well,
100
the
years ago.
even more obvious one is the social consensus 50 years ago was that gay are wrong. It's a choice, and people who make that choice are wrong and should be opposed, sometimes violently.
Yeah. So that is a negative social consensus. That is something that did not hold up to the test of time. Yeah, I see what you mean with that. So that's a big, complex, dubious sphere of discourse that I'm not equipped to deal with on my own because I am one man who is thinly read. So
Yeah,
this is the Open Discourse podcast. This is what we do,
yeah, um,
man.
yeah. And so I don't really have a conclusion for that. It's just something that's been eating me up on the inside because it seems like I feel like we're faced with like a no-win scenario where you censor someone to use the term and to use the negative term here. You prevent someone from speaking about what is arguably a provably bad viewpoint, provably harmful, toxic, what have you.
Yeah,
And they martyr themselves and they recruit new people to their cause. Or you let them speak and they bring in gullible new people to their cause. And it's just,
yeah.
yeah, I have
Or
nothing to
not even
say there.
necessarily gullible, but just like the accessible and vulnerable disenfranchised. That's something like, from what I understand of the alt-right movement, was that these are like profoundly disaffected young white men who have been absorbed into a sphere of discourse that like revolves around like an easy outlet of like what the problems of their lives are caused by, which is the concepts of liberalism and feminism and racial equality is the source of their struggles in life.
Yeah,
Is that
I
fair to say?
I guess it's just tearing me apart to say that again.
Yeah, everything hurts. Everything hurts so much. Jesus
Yeah, but
Christ.
one
And
thing
it's
that has been interesting that hasn't really been tearing me apart and just more like where I'm at in my ideological, I don't know, shifting sands that is my ideology.
yeah.
Um, is I've really been like thinking about like I don't think I'm ever gonna go full blown socialist because there's a lot I disagree with in socialism that we've gone over before. I don't agree with the need for centralized authoritarian anything.
Yeah.
Um, in a general sense, there are cases where it is needed, but in a general sense. But like looking at technology, because that's the field I work in, it's very hard to reconcile the concepts behind good, solid software or technology and profitability,
Yeah.
i.e., capitalism. Um, in that a good piece of software has a handful of functions that it does really well, and it is designed entirely around that.
Yeah.
And when it needs to be updated to keep up with stuff that's going on, you update it to keep up. But software development in the corporate world, as far as I can tell, you just keep tacking on new features and new development, and your code base just bloats and bloats and bloats even larger. And it's just not feasible for that to go on indefinitely. And then on top of that, you have user facing technologies such as social media and things like YouTube that are always operating at a net negative. They're not making profit. And
Mm.
all this hubbub recently with YouTube trying to make everything advertiser friendly because they need the money. And it's just, it's really bringing me around to back to that point of we may have outgrown capitalism.
Yeah. I relate to that a whole bunch. It's like they say it's very like late capitalism or post capitalism.
Yeah.
That we're like reaching the point where it's like really started to unravel on itself.
Yeah.
And I like your meta, and I like your meta. I appreciate your metaphors coming from your experience with like what structurally works and what does not work.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back
Yeah.
to our discussion on a previous episode about like the premise of infinite consumption relies on the implied capability for infinite production, which is not the reality of the world.
Yeah. There is a certain like like limit to upward momentum on that stuff. And the problem is, from what I've understand, that like capitalism relies on not only a sustainable forward velocity, but a sustainable forward acceleration. That it relies on a consistent growth that is wicked unsustainable, um, as of now, because like consistent accelerated growth and like just accelerated momentum and stuff is, already spiraling out of control like crazy.
Yeah,
Or
it's
not spiraling out of control, but just hitting the limit of like what the fucking
well, we've hit the
the
tipping point.
Earth and what the global society can, you know,
Can sustain.
handle on its own. Yeah, the weight that it can shoulder. Ugh. Man, big concepts exhausting. There was I think it was Jim Skelly, one of the professors from our school, who talked about at one point just like a good like quotable piece of his was just like you hear all this stuff about the world and it's very depressing. It's all
Yeah,
very
it's
depressing.
really like if you take too much time to sit and think about it, it just sort of weighs you down.
Yeah. And it makes you, and as depression does, it makes you want to shut down and it makes you want to stop existing. It makes you just want to like lie down and shrivel up and die. And
Yeah, like I
that,
was out at dinner or no, I was getting lunch with my parents and some family friends, and the family friends I'm speaking of are in their 70s. They're both retired, or at least one of them is retired, I think.
yeah,
Um, and the guy, the man, the husband of the two of them, it's a man and his wife, a woman and her husband, blah blah blah. Um, he just turns to me and my sister and goes, "Man, I'm glad I'm old because I don't want to live through the repercussions of the shit that's going down right now." And I'm like, "Thanks, thanks a lot.
a lot of
It's
fucking good
not
that does
even one.
us.
Today was gonna be a good day."
I'm really gonna take solace in the when I'm dealing with like the roughest shit of the fucking century. Like I'm gonna be glad knowing that you died 5 years ago and didn't have to deal with it. Like that's gonna really get me through the
Yeah,
night.
that really makes my day that you're looking forward to not having to dealing with the repercussions for the stuff going on.
Yeah, lucky for fucking you. Okay. What an asshole. But so,
Well, I mean, he's a lovable asshole. I think he was trying to be, cheeky,
oh yeah, no,
but it was just like,
it's a good,
oh no.
it's a good joke. But then it's like, oh, good for
Yeah,
you.
you laugh and then it sinks in, and you're like, oh god.
But so this, I was something Jim Skelly said a while ago that was just like, you see all this stuff, and your compulsion is to like become very depressed about it, of course. But like, the metaphor he says is like that's like waking up and realizing that your house is on fire and thinking, oh, that's depressing.
Yeah,
When the proper response is to stand up, become alarmed, become active, do what you can to stop it, or get angry about
yeah.
it,
I've been looking
or just,
into volunteering, both as a means to meet people because I have no social life in this predominantly old white area, and also because I just can't handle being a passive participant anymore.
oh yeah, that'd be excellent work. You should totally do that. Yeah.
And like my parents were saying, oh, you should go to the local Democrat place That is not what they said. I am truncating it because I don't remember what they said, but they were like, "Oh, you should volunteer for the Democrats." And remember that part earlier where I
Sure.
said I don't believe in parties? So
Yeah.
basically, I probably just crowdsource it on Facebook or something and just say, "Hey, does anyone know any good places to volunteer? Like, I'm not content just donating money anymore. I need to actively be part of fixing the mess we're in."
Yeah. The idea is like don't get bummed out about it, like get angry about it,
Yeah,
and then
like I've
work
been
to
trying to
change
wrap
the
my head
argument.
around like how do you address the fact that there's an uneven distribution of information in society that's perpetuated by political machines and propaganda, and that's a tough one. Uh, and as well as you know, how would you go about dismantling the two party system? Because I think that needs to happen.
Yeah,
Um,
and I don't know what that
and like I
entails,
said,
and I
I
don't know
think we
what
should
that
dismantle
results
parties
in.
altogether, but I think that's unrealistic, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, the best idea I've had for something I could do recently is if I knew more people who are activists, just start a local movement to make voting days work holidays. You know, like go to like our local legislators, and because it's Texas, everyone's Republican, and Republicans use code language that you can use against them. So, like, oh, you know, if you really want to help out the working people, represent the working people, have their interests represented in government, you should make a work day off for voting. You know, something
Yeah.
along those lines. And then get enough groundswell behind that, get it passed. Then go to a state legislature after a couple years and say, look how well this has worked, and tack that on to,
I'm sure
don't you
people
want
have
to
been
represent the
trying to
working
get
people?
voting
And
days as a
that is
national holiday for like
hypothetically.
the longest time.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm sure people have been trying to get like election days as a national holiday for the longest fucking time.
I'm sure they
Because so
have,
many
but
other
all I've
countries
ever
do
seen is
that.
people
That's got to
just
be like such
puttering
a big
about saying
point.
we need it as a national holiday. I'm saying if no one's tried it, we should try and start from the bottom. Like start with local areas, get it to your state legislature. You know, use the language that plays well with politicians against them.
Yeah.
And then when you have enough states doing it, it will eventually become a national holiday.
One would hope.
You know, and I think we need to back off from relying on the federal government, the centralized federal government for everything. I don't think. Because look at where we're at now. The federal government is poised to ruin everything for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
And, like, there's merit to the, like, oh, but what, you know, the federal government should be there to, like, say, no, child labor is wrong, no, slavery is wrong, no,
We
racism
need
is
public
bad,
schools.
stuff like that, or no, murder is always bad, basic stuff like that, or to provide for interstate infrastructure and public works and whatnot, interstate standards for education, all that good stuff. That all has merit, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
maybe we need to, like, if we want a holiday for voting day, maybe we shouldn't be asking the federal government first.
Yeah. Yeah, work it up from state levels.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Hmm. All right. Do you want to wrap it up?
I I guess we can. We've been going for about an hour. Are you ready
Yeah.
to call it?
Yeah, I'm good for now.
All right. This will be
All
a
right.
short one, then, I suppose.
Yeah. I think the 2 hours at a time structure was like a lot.
You think?
I do.
I didn't really have a
Maybe that
problem with it, but
there were a
I
lot
don't
of
have a
times where it
problem
was
with
just like
just
easy
not
enough to
having a
just go and go.
defined time and just sort of cutting it when we're out
Yeah.
of stuff to say.
I think an hour a week is like in terms of podcasts that I listen to that like that is like pretty standard. Like that's substantial.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I listened to. We just sort of did 2 hours our first time and ran with it.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah, a lot of the stuff I listen to ranges from like an hour to like 3 hours long.
yeah.
So I've
And
seen it done
I
in many ways.
and we are the both of us working on figuring out like getting the time into this podcast, into our lives and our other schedules and obligations, and also at least in terms of me, my crippling depressive inability to work on any independent projects. But so I'm pleased like putting this one at an hour and see now that we're off of this hiatus, like how we can keep picking it up in the future. So
all right, yeah, that's fine. I think it's easier to go longer anyway when we have more than just us.
Yeah. All right.
So,
You've been listening to the Open Discourse podcast. I'm Jay. I've been here with Dave, and he's been here with me. We have the Facebook page, facebook.com/opendiscourse, and the website open-discourse.com.
God, I don't think I've posted anything to that website since like the first month I made it.
It's fine. We got some articles on there. We got the.
I wish there were tons of people who wanted to write stuff. I wish people had written stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm not good at putting my thoughts into writing. I will say that right now.
I mean, I could be writing stuff, but I won't. And check out the rest of the YouTube channel for previous things we did. Talk about dumb shit. Yeah.
I need to update the YouTube playlist.
And once again, everybody, like, if you are listening to this, to be on a podcast such as our own, like, it is as easy as sending us a goddamn message.
Also, it's super low risk because like the only people who listen to this are like friends and friends of friends and maybe some of their friends.
We are non-professionals. You will not be exposed publicly in any way.
We're also not big time by any measure.
And you will definitely be the smartest person on this podcast if you join it.
Yep.
So thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you, or you will hear us. We won't see you because you're just listening. Anyway, see ya.
All right.